Have you ever heard of a witch buried under a half-done stone slab so the devil couldn't bring her back to life? This isn't a scene from a horror movie. It's the real, tragic story of Lilias, Adie, the TorryBrun Witch. Today, we're journeying back to 17th and 18th century Scotland, to a small coastal village called Torryburn in Fife. This seemingly peaceful place was the epicenter of a brutal and terrifying period of witch hunting, and Lilias Adie's story is one of its most haunting chapters. So, who was Lilias Adie? She was an ordinary woman living in Torryburn in the early 1700s. Her life was likely quiet and unremarkable, until one day in 1704, when a neighbor accused her of practicing witchcraft. The accusations were wild and specific, casting spells on neighbors and, most shockingly, fornicating with the devil. This accusation set in motion a horrific process. Lilias was thrown into prison, where she was subjected to relentless interrogation by the local minister, a man named Alan Logan. Logan was a notorious witch hunter. He was known for his extreme methods, like pricking suspects with a long pin to find the so-called devil's mark, a spot on the body that was supposedly insensitive to pain. He would even publicly call out suspected witches from his pulpit, using his position of power to incite fear and paranoia throughout the community. For an entire month, Lilias Adie endured this torment. She was likely deprived of sleep, a common tactic used to break down a person's will and extract a confession. Under this immense pressure, she finally confessed. But her confession was remarkable. Instead of naming other women as fellow witches, a common practice that often led to more accusations and deaths, Lilias protected them. She described the devil as being cold as clay, wearing a hat, and having feet like cloven hooves. She gave vivid descriptions of a phantom coven, but she did not implicate any of her neighbors. It's a small but powerful act of defiance that likely saved others from suffering the same fate. Tragically, Lilias Adie would never face a trial or a formal execution. Before she could be sentenced, she died in her prison cell. The exact cause of her death remains unknown, but it's widely believed she took her own life to escape the inevitable fate of being burned at the stake. Her death created a problem for the authorities, because she was an accused witch who had died by suicide. She couldn't be buried in consecrated ground, the hallowed churchyard. The villagers and the church leaders were terrified that if she wasn't properly contained, the devil would come to reclaim her body and reanimate her corpse to terrorize the village. So they chose a truly unique and symbolic burial spot, the foreshore of Torryburn, in the muddy ground between the high and low tide marks. This intertidal zone was considered neither land nor sea, a liminal space for someone deemed to be outside the grace of God, and to make absolutely sure she stayed put, they placed a massive half-ton sandstone slab directly over her grave. This heavy stone was a physical barrier meant to literally pin her down and prevent any supernatural escape. To this day, Lilias Adie's grave is the only known intertidal witch grave in all of Scotland. It stands as a powerful, chilling monument to the fear that gripped this community. But the story doesn't end there. In 1852, a group of antiquarians and grave robbers dug up her remains. They took her skull, and it was eventually passed around private collectors before ending up at St. Andrews University, where it was photographed in 1904. Then, sometime in the 20th century, the skull vanished. It has never been seen again. For over a century, the face of Lilias Adie was lost to time. But in 2017, forensic scientists at the University of Dundee used those century-old photographs to do something incredible. They created a digital 3D reconstruction of her face. For the first time, we could look into the eyes of a woman who had been persecuted so unjustly. The reconstruction reveals a gentle-looking woman with features that showed signs of a hard life. It's a powerful reminder that behind the label witch was a real human being. A person with a story, a family, and a life that was brutally cut short. Now, Lilias, Adie's case is the most famous from Torryburn, but it wasn't the first. Decades earlier, in 1666, the village experienced an even larger witch trial. This event is known as the case of the 7 witches of Torryburn. 7 women: Grisel Anderson, Agnes Brune, Margaret Cowie, Margaret Doby, Elspeth Guild, Margaret Horn, and Christian May were all accused of witchcraft in a mass hysteria. The details of their accusations are less clear, but the outcome was swift and brutal. All 7 were found guilty, and on September 29, 1666, they were all executed on the same day, likely strangled and then burned at the stake. Their stories are a stark reminder of how quickly and devastatingly these witch panics could spread. So, what has become of this dark history? Today, there's a growing movement in Scotland to acknowledge and remember the victims of the witch trials. Torryburn is now a key part of the Fife Witches Trail, a route that connects locations associated with the persecutions. The Fife Coast and Countryside Trust has helped install commemorative plaques in nearby villages like Culross and Valleyfield, as well as in Torryburn itself, to honor the memories of Lilias, Adie, and the thousands of others who were accused. If you ever find yourself in Fife, you can actually visit the site of Lilias Adie's grave. Finding it can be a bit of a treasure hunt. You need to head to the Torryburn foreshore, specifically a place called Westpans. The grave is only visible at low tide, so you need to check the tide times carefully. You're looking for that large, flat sandstone slab lying in the mud, sometimes covered in seaweed. It's not officially marked with a large sign, but local historians and walkers have placed a smaller, simple memorial near the spot. Standing there, on that windy, muddy shore, with the tide out, you can't help but feel the weight of history. It's a somber, powerful experience. More broadly, there's a national campaign in Scotland calling for a formal legal pardon and a national apology for all those who were convicted of witchcraft. Campaigners argue that it's time to right this historical wrong and officially recognize these individuals not as criminals or witches, but as victims of a terrible injustice. In early 2022, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, did issue a formal apology on behalf of the Scottish government, calling the witch trials an egregious, historic injustice. It was a landmark moment, a step towards healing and remembrance. The story of the Torryburn witch trials, of Lilias Adie and the 7 women who came before her, is a crucial part of Scottish history. It's a story about fear, superstition, and the abuse of power. But it's also a story about resilience, defiance, and the enduring human spirit. When we look at the reconstructed face of Lilias Adie, we're not just seeing a witch from a dark fairy tale. We're seeing a woman who, in her own way, fought back against an unjust system, and whose story continues to resonate with us centuries later. It's a powerful reminder to question authority, to stand up against injustice, and to always remember the human beings behind the headlines of history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a dark but important part of Scotland's past. If you found this story compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical explorations. Let me know in the comments what you think about the story of Lilias Adie and the movement to pardon Scotland's accused witches. See you next time.